The 19th century in Bengal saw the birth of many luminaries in the field of literature and art. And one of them, born in 1887, was the great Sukumar Rai, son of another great personality, Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhuri. Upendra Kishore was a genius in many fields. He was a pioneer in the field of photography. He was an eminent name in the promotion of children's literature, and his Sandesh, which became a very popular magazine for children, was definitely very important in the field of Bengali literature. Sukumar Rai, Upendra Kishore's son, was equally, if not more, a genius. And what he did in his very small span of life, for just 36 years, still remains with us as outstanding. Now, in fact, we can talk on Sukumar Rai for hours, but for today's class, we shall be concentrating on only one of his poems, taken from his great book Abol Tabol. Now, naturally, the poem which I shall read here is the translation, is the translated version of the original poem, and the translation has been done by me. Before I take up the poem, just a few words about Sukumar and his genius. The seminal points about Sukumar's genius, definitely, the seminal points I should say, definitely were fun, irony, humor, and satire. They were some very important aspects of his genius. And Sukumar, in fact, initiated the Nonsense Club in their new residence at Shukia Street in Calcutta around 1901 or 2. Now, well, please look at the name, Nonsense Club. And there, at the initiative of Sukumar, they started a handwritten magazine. The name of the handwritten magazine is also very interesting. It was called Share Botrish Bhaja. If we translate it in English, it will be 32 and a half fried items. Now, there is a history behind such a name. During that time, in the early years of the 20th century, roaming salesmen were very popular. They used to sell different items. And one popular street food that they used to vend was a mixture of fried items, 32 fried items. And when a plate of 32 fried items was served to a customer, they would invariably place a fried half chili on it. Therefore, now we can understand the name 32 and a half fried items, Share Botrish Bhaja in Bengali. Now, that was the name which was given to the handwritten magazine by Sukumar Rai. And in one issue of the magazine, he wrote a poem on Lord Curzon. And I have translated that poem. Now, this poem reads like this: Lord Curzon, a wicked Saturn in Indian horizon. Lord Curzon, a wicked Saturn in Indian horizon, malicious, crude, conspiring, and shrewd, is a snake with deadly poison. Now, very interesting. Sukumar Rai was not directly involved in the politics of Bengal and India. Well, but he was greatly politically conscious, and he had definitely great sympathy for the freedom fighters and the so-called terrorists who were trying to free the country from the clutches of the British rule. And well, his Abul Tabul, a poem taken from Abul Tabul, on which I shall be concentrating, as I said, today. His Abul Tabul definitely is one of the greatest treasures of Bengali literature. And Abul Tabul has been translated by me as whimsical nonsense. Whimsical nonsense. Now, in the preface to the book, Sukumar writes, the book, and I read, definitely, I have translated the Bengali preface, and I read, the book deals with all that is absurd. The book deals with all that is absurd, strange, and impossible. It is a book of Khayal Rasha. Now, please note, Khayal Rasha. Now, in ancient Sanskrit aesthetics, Rasha is a chapter, very important chapter in Bharat's Natyashastra. And in Bharat's Natyashastra, he has mentioned 8 rasas. Now, we have to be very clear about it. that he mentioned 8 rasas. The 9th rasa, the Shanta rasa, was included later. Initially, there were 8 rasas, and among these 8 rasas, not 9, I repeat, because the 9th one was included later. So, among these 8 rasas, Harsha was definitely one. But can we relate Khyal with Hassa, Khyal or Vim? That is a point we should be definitely taking up. Well, definitely we shall have to be very short in our discussion, because this will be a small class as I have decided. The nonsense, what is nonsense? I have said that I have translated Abul Tabul as whimsical nonsense, and well, nonsense poem, that was definitely something which was mentioned by Sukumar himself. And what is nonsense? In the concise Oxford Dictionary, in the entry we see nonsense is explained in the following manner. Nonsense means absurd or meaningless words or ideas, foolish or extravagant conduct. So that is nonsense. So can we connect this definition of the concise Oxford Dictionary with the idea of Sukumar's nonsense? That is a question. Or Hasha Rasa, as mentioned by Varata, can we connect this with Sukumar's Khyal Rasa? That is also a point. And well, that needs an elaborate discussion, but we do not have much time today, so we shall be discussing very quickly. We shall definitely be pointing out certain things. Now, well, there is no tradition of nonsense in Indian literature, Bengali literature perhaps. But Sukumar definitely was influenced by some Western writers. But before that, we shall have to mention, in connection with the word nonsense, we shall have to mention a few names, a few great names. Now, Plato. What was Plato's theory about laughter? Plato had reservations about laughter. Plato definitely, he said that, well, no writer should be permitted to cause any pain to the citizen. So laughter must not cause any pain. And Aristotle, in his Poetics, he's more clear about that. And well, he gives a definition of the ridiculous. So he says in Poetics, Aristotle says that ridiculous, this is I quote from Aristotle, ridiculous may be defined as a mistake or deformity. Ridiculous may be defined as a mistake or deformity not productive of pain or harm to others. So that is there, Well, they had reservations about, causing pain, both Plato and Aristotle. But we find there is a departure in the comedies of Aristophanes. In Aristophanes, this satire is more pungent, especially if we look at a particular play by Aristophanes, Frogs. So the element of satire, the element of ridicule is there predominantly. And, so this satire in Aristophanes' Frogs is basically against the authority, the establishment. And Menander, another playwright, introduced the comedy of manners. And this was followed by the Romans, the Roman writers, the Roman playwrights, Plautus and Terence, and later the great French writer Moliere. And Moliere definitely had influenced William Shakespeare. So, laughter is excited through different elements. The elements of ridicule is one of them. And we see that this element of ridicule in Cervantes, Don Quixote. I don't know the exact pronunciation. Well, it may be Don Quixote, as some people say. What is the Spanish pronunciation? I do not know. So, let us pronounce it as Don Quixote. So, in Don Quixote, the element of ridicule is there predominantly. In Chaucer, we find this element of satire and the element of ridicule. Sukumar definitely had assimilated all these, and he created his own brand of nonsense or his own brand of humor. Now, two men, I must mention them. Well, one is definitely the great writer of Alice in Wonderland, Louis Carroll. So, how far was Sukumar influenced by Louis Carroll? And we can say, well, we have to be quick, therefore, we cannot elaborate, but we can say that it was simply an inspiration, nothing more than that. But, Sukumar definitely had his own genius, and that genius, for that to flourish that genius, he was influenced by, he took inspiration from, another man, Edward Lear. And the influence of Lear on Sukumar is evident. Especially, when we see that Edward Lear also provided sketches along with his poems. Similar thing was done by Sukumar. Now, in a later class perhaps we can take this up, Lear and Carroll and Sukumar, more elaborately. But for today, let us just simply mention that Sukumar was definitely inspired by, Carroll and Lear. And the influence of Lear was definitely greater than the influence of Carroll. But as I said, Sukumar created his own brand of humor, his own brand of nonsense, which can be compared to the creation of none else. And there remains the greatness of Sukumar. Now, very quickly, I shall be telling you about the rhyme scheme. Is there any particular rhyme scheme, nonsense rhyme? No, not that. Sukumar, followed the pattern, the conventional pattern. Well, in one of the most ancient rhyme scheme in Bengali poetry is Poyar. Now, Sukumar, followed this Poyar scheme. And well, very quickly, I'll tell you something about Poyar. What is Poyar? Well, this is n rhyming scheme, and well, this can be used in different ways. For shorter lines and for longer lines. Well, Poyar can be used, and Sukumar definitely made use of Poyar in his and in his own way, and there are some basic rules of Poyar. I'll be mentioning them. Number one, the in each couplet, well, uh, the each line uh, must have two divisions. In each couplet, each line must have two divisions. They must be rhyming couplets. And then in each couplet, the meaning must be fully or at least partially complete. So, number one, in each couplet, each line must have two divisions. Number two, they must be rhyming couplets. Number three, in each couplet, the meaning must be fully or at least partially be complete. So now we quickly go on to the poem that we need to that we have decided to discuss today. So the poem is, in Bengali, the poem is Baburam Shapure. Now Shapure, now well, I have consulted the dictionary. In Bengali dictionary, Shapure means one who catches snakes and then well shows his control over snakes. Well, he exhibits his control over the snakes, apparently making the snakes dance, etc., etc. Now, the Oxford Dictionary says a snake charmer is a man who shows his control over snakes by making them dance or play, etc., etc. So, well, Bengali Shapure has been explained in the dictionary, Bengali dictionary, in two ways. There are two meanings interrelated, maybe. One who catches snakes plus one who plays with snakes. So I have, in my translation, I have not used snake charmer. I have used snake catcher. Now, there may be, perhaps, snake charmer. If I use snake charmer, then, it would have been difficult for me to maintain the rhythm. I have tried to maintain the original rhythm as far as possible. So, I have used snake catcher for Shapure. Now, Baburam, Baburam, the name is very significant. Baburam, not the name of a gentleman. Baburam is actually considered a name that can be given to the underdogs. In other words, Baburam as if is a Dalit. Now I shall be taking up this point after I read the poem. Now there are distinctly three voices in the poem, and the most important, the most vocal, the most articulate, or perhaps the only articulate voice is the voice of the narrator. Baburam is always silent. Baburam is always at the receiving end. And the snakes, well, unfortunate and innocuous snakes, they have no voice. So the narrator speaks. Baburam only listens. Or, in other words, the narrator commands Baburam. Baburam, the Dalit, is commanded by the authority. Who is the authority? The Vadralok? No, there are other meanings which we shall be, well, definitely pointing out those meanings as well. Now, see, this is my translation of Baburam Shapure. Well, Baburam the snake catcher. This is my translation. Now I'll be reading. Snake catcher Baburam, where do you now turn? Come along, and please do keep here a snake or two that are eyeless, hoodless, clawless, do not run or crawl, do not sting at all, they never hiss or hoot, never hit or hurt, no tantrums, no vice, feed on milk and rice. Snakes without trouble, just bring a couple. I can hit them bold and make them cold. So, Baburam is being commanded by a Bhadralok. Baburam is being commanded by a strong voice. Baburam is being commanded by a man who, or I don't know, a man or a woman who has power or authority. Now, well, two or three things I'll tell you. That killing of snakes, well, that definitely refers to an ecological problem, an ecological crisis. So men are, well, very often seen killing snakes indiscriminately. Even today, in the countryside, if a snake is seen, people will kill the snakes. Now, we can remember a reference in the Mahabharata. Now, in the Mahabharata, we know Parikshit was stung or hit by a snake, Takshak. Parikshit died. And Parikshit's descendant, Janmejoy, arranged an elaborate ritual, a ritual to kill snakes. And hundreds and thousands of snakes were killed. Finally, of course, well, he was prevented from making any further damage to the snakes. But the idea of killing snakes, why snakes should be killed? Because they are enemies of man. This concocted belief, this false belief has been prevalent in the society, and snakes are killed. But, well, killing of snakes can create an ecological problem, definitely. So snakes must not be killed. So ignorant people, ignorant voices are still very violent about snakes. So there is that point here. But who is Baburam? Baburam will be catching the snakes. But the narrator doesn't have the capacity, the power to catch snakes. So Baburam, he is an expert, he will catch snakes. Now I don't know whether Sukumar was thinking of the political condition of Bengal. The British unleashing violence on the revolutionaries and even on the civilians through their agents, the police. So the Baburams are the agents of the government. Baburam will catch snake, not the authority, and Baburam will give the snake to the authority, and then the authority will punish them. So there may be an explanation. So Baburam, the innocent, the powerless, and perhaps the moneyless agent, he is used to catch snakes. So Baburam is the agent of the strong authority, and the snakes are the victims. But there are two kinds of snakes, you see, the poisonous one and the non-poisonous one. So, well, for any authority, the non-poisonous snake will be an easier proposition to deal with, and so bring a few snakes that are innocuous. Now, well, we can, as I said, that there are, well, several voices in the poem, and as I said, that the voice of the narrator is the predominant voice, the vocal voice. But what about Baburam? Baburam doesn't have the power to articulate. Baburam is powerless, equally powerless as the snakes are. And the aggressive snakes or the poisonous snakes are a potential danger for the narrator. So, the narrator doesn't want to tackle the poisonous snakes. He will only torture the harmless ones. And this poem, therefore, you may say, leaves a message that well, primarily this is a threat, a coercion on the underprivileged, a threat of coercion on the underprivileged. The first, the innocuous, the less powerful, or rather the powerless ones, will be taken and they will be thrashed because it is easy to tackle them. And thrashing them, thrashing the poisonless snakes, a message will be left to these poisonous snakes that, well, same treatment may be given to you, so be careful. So the authority will catch the innocuous ones, the weak ones who are easy to handle, and unleash their violence on them as if to leave a message to the others, the stronger ones. This may be one kind of the message that the poem leaves. Now, fear, fear, generation of fear, very important, because if fear is generated, then perhaps many things can be easily done. So, well, a sense of fear must be spread by thrashing the innocent snakes or the innocuous victims or the weaker people. A sense of fear will be spread that, well, the same thing awaits you. Now, so who is the narrator? The narrator may be the representative of the ruling community, and therefore men in power or men at the helm always have their works done by middlemen, done through their agents. And as I said, the snake catcher Baburam may be the second agent. The narrator is the first agent. The real authority, the real power is behind, and the narrator is the first agent. Baburam, the poor, powerless, is the second agent. Is used as the second agent. Baburam doesn't make any sound. Baburam is voiceless. Baburam is powerless. Now, perhaps there may be another meaning that, well, if we refer to the revolutionary movement in Bengal, so there were firebrand revolutionaries who were difficult to tackle. So the innocuous one, the harmless ones, or rather the non-violent ones, they were easy to tackle. So take them, put them in jail, hang them, and leave a message for the countrymen that, well, if you go against the authority, the British government, this will be your predicament. So this may be, well, one version of the explanation. This may be. Because, well, of course, as I said, Sukumar was a politically conscious poet, and his political consciousness might have worked here in this poem too. So this violence on the innocuous snakes, as I said, may be a kind of a message to the people in general. In the innocuous snakes are the non-violent, the meeker elements who can be tackled, as I said, more easily. But the fervent terrorists, they are they are definitely they will be a difficult, well, proposition to deal with. Therefore, Baburam Shapure, that is the Bengali poem, Baburam the snake catcher, as I well, apparently it is a simple poem. A simple poem for the young children. Well, the young children who are naturally afraid of snakes, and well, they'll be laughing that, well, Baburam will be bringing, well, snakes that will feed on rice and milk. Baburam will be bringing innocuous snakes that can be tackled very easily, because, well, snake, definitely the name snake generates fear in the mind, in everybody's mind, in children's mind, definitely. But, well, there is a deeper meaning, and we have tried to explore this deeper meaning in the poem. Thank you very much.